Welcome everybody. This is ISES with today's webinar on the ISES Solar World Congress 2023. Please hold the line while we wait for more attendees to join. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Please hold the line and we will begin shortly. All right, welcome everybody to today's webinar presented by ISES, the International Solar Energy Society. My name is Arabella and today we are having a webinar on the ISES Solar World Congress 2023. And before we go ahead, just a quick word from myself. So I'm Arabella. I am the ISES Communications, Conferences and Outreach Manager. I've joined ISES about 5 years ago now, and we have been working on conferences ever since, or I have been working on conferences ever since. And I'm happy to introduce you to the different people we will have on the call today. And before we start, because I know that many of you are new to us, we will give a short introduction into ISES and the work we do. And that's what I'm going to get us started with first. So ISES, who are we? Good question. We are a UN accredited membership NGO, and we have been around since the 1950s, and we got accredited by the UN in 1992. We have individual and corporate members from 110 countries all around the world. And our vision is 100% renewable energy for all, used efficiently and wisely. And to support this mission and to get it where it needs to go, we have a range of key activities. So we do biannual congresses all around the world, such as this year's ISES Solar World Congress. We also have a European conference. The next one is coming up in 2024. We have two key publications. One is the Solar Energy Journal. It's one of the longest standing and most established journals in the solar research realm. And then additionally, in 2021, we added Solar Energy Advances, which is a fully open access solar energy journal. We have webinars such as the one today, as well as education initiatives both online and offline at our events. We do infographics on different solar topics, and we also have a solar energy museum that's a virtual museum. Now, because I know we all want to get started with the actual webinar, just a quick word on the Q&A session. We will have presentations by our presenters first, and then we will have the Q&A session at the very end of the webinar. But you can already start submitting your questions anytime throughout the webinar. You can use the chat box on your GoToWebinar panel, type in your question, and please keep your questions short and precise so that we will know who to assign the question to. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to our moderator for today, Dave Renee. Dave Renee has been the ISES president from 2010 to 2019, and he's now the immediate past president of ISES. And he's also this year's ISES Solar World Congress conference chair. Dave has worked with the Renewable Energy Laboratory in the US for a very long time, and now he has his own renewable energy agency. So Dave, welcome to the webinar. I'm going to hand over to you now. And maybe turn on your camera if you can.
I did turn on my camera. Is it on? Okay. Thank you very much, Arabella, and for your kind introduction and for putting together this webinar. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As Arabella said, I'm Dave Renee. I'm serving as the chairman of the conference coming up here in New Delhi, India. The theme of the conference is moving the world towards 100% renewable energy. So ISES has been putting together these conferences for over half a century now. They typically biennial conferences. They bring together solar energy researchers, practitioners, and stakeholders to share technology developments, new research breakthroughs, case studies, and best practices in solar and renewable energy development. So we're very excited to be in New Delhi this year. The dates are the 30th of October to the 4th of November. As you all probably know, India has among the world's most ambitious solar energy targets, looking at 300 gigawatts of installed solar PV capacity by 2030 That's up from a 100 gigawatt target that was set for 2022. And we're very pleased to be coming back to India for the first time since 1978, back when solar was still in its infancy. These solar targets that are set by the National Solar Mission come with many challenges and opportunities. And so the Congress is going to bring to the forefront key decision makers and researchers who are working to make these targets a reality. We're going to engage the international community to offer shared experiences of solar energy development around the world. And it's important to note here that India is on center stage for renewable energy development in 1983, since it's taken up the leadership role in the intergovernmental forum known as the G20, and it's also hosting the Clean Energy Ministerial, and as well as taking the leadership role for the IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency General Assembly. And in addition to that, the International Solar Alliance, which is an intergovernmental organization striving to increase deployment of solar energy technologies and solutions in its member countries, is also headquartered in India. And there's a number of renowned technology universities and research institutes in India that are undertaking cutting-edge solar energy research. And we're pleased to announce that we have several partners, supporting partners that are joining the conference, including the National Solar Energy Federation of India and the Solar Thermal Federation of India, as well as the Solar Energy Society of India, among others. So by attending the Congress, you're going to have the opportunity to learn the latest about what's going on in solar research and development, as well as applications, both for solar thermal as well as solar electric technologies, and along with that, grid flexibility and enhancements as we face an increasingly distributed energy system. We'll be talking about storage technologies, off-grid programs, solar design for buildings and urban regions, solar fuel development, educational programs, and a number of other topics covered under the 13 Congress themes. And you'll hear more about that at the end of this webinar. So there's many ways in which you can share your knowledge. We've had a call for papers issued a few weeks ago, which provides detailed information how to submit an abstract or a proposal to present your own work, either through an oral or a poster presentation, and also publish your work in the Congress proceedings. And there's also the opportunity to propose side events, such as forums or other discussion events focusing on specific topics. So India, together with many other countries, is stepping up to meet the challenges created by the consequences of human-caused global warming. More and more, we're learning about countries as well as companies and industry, including utilities, that are targeting an energy system that will be supplied by 100% renewables as a solution to the climate challenge. So by attending the Congress, you'll learn more about how these initiatives are being implemented and the technology R&D that is still needed to accelerate achieving a goal of 100% renewable energy. And at the Congress, you'll be provided with new tools and expanded horizons for implementing these solutions in your home community. So I look forward to welcoming you at the Congress, October 30th to November 4th in New Delhi. So now what I would like to do is introduce the first of our three excellent panelists that we have today to give you their background and their thoughts about the Congress and the technologies that we're hoping to bring forward into Congress. Our first panelist is Gurleen Kaur. She's the the Congress 2023 Theme Chair for Innovative Application of PV Technologies. Dr. Kaur is an engineer trained in liberal arts and passionate about using technology to create impactful, affordable, clean energy solutions. Currently, she works as a reliability specialist for emerging PV technologies at Total Energies, where she conducts reliability studies in harsh environments for floating PV and agri-PV applications. So Dr. Kaur, thank you for being here, and I'm very pleased to turn the podium over to you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Rene. It is a pleasure to present on a very interesting topic today. I hope you're able to see my screen.
Yep, everything's fine.
Okay,
Please go ahead.
perfect. A very good afternoon to all of you. And today I would be talking about the topic of integrated photovoltaics, which is also the area of the theme that I am chairing at the Solar World Congress, which is to happen in Delhi this year in the last week of October and first week of November. I hope all of you register for it. So the outline of my presentation would involve an overview of integrated PV, floating PV, agri PV, BIPV, and followed by conclusion. I hope all of us believe that the global temperatures are rising. If not, you need to talk to the generation of our parents and grandparents. And they will tell you that summers are getting hotter and hotter in Europe every year. And if you happen to come from the subtropical areas like myself from India, you will feel that it is getting colder and colder in winters. For instance, my grandparents never had seen a hailstorm in Punjab, which is the northwestern region of India. And this year alone, hailstorms damaged 40% of the wheat crop last month. So the changing climate patterns not only impacts temperature, but in turn our living conditions, food security, and even our livelihood. So therefore, it is important to note that the extent to which our current and future generations will experience a hotter and different world depends not only on our choices now, but also in the near term. So let's look at the global energy trends since 2000. So if we can see the graph, we see that the power consumption is rising, and the oil consumption or the growth of the oil is slowing down in the past 2 decades. And because of the availability and presence of alternate sources of energy, the demand for the coal is also slowing down. However, there is a good news, which is the natural gas and renewable sources of energy are growing at the same speed, which can explain the energy intensity gain as part of the decoupling between GDP and emission growth. So where are we heading? So if energy is reinventing itself, so are we. We at Total Energies not only are moving ahead towards the direction of energy affordability, security, and sustainability, but we need to ensure not only as a company, but also as a community of global thought leaders and also citizens of the world, that we need to move in that direction with less emissions. And renewable energy is the way to go forward. So as per the Renewable Energy Global Status Report of 2022, world needs to add 825 gigawatt of renewable energy each year until 2050 to combat 1.5 degree rise in temperature. And we see from this chart that wind and solar capacities are leading the way. In fact, they are almost doubling in these decades. As per Total Energies energy outlook scenario, wind and solar will represent 90% of the new generation in 2050. So we have a way, and we need to hurry up in going towards this solution. So the area or the focus area of our R&D is to assess better sites, develop new technologies, reduce operations and maintenance cost of these technologies, and also use AI for photovoltaic developments. So coming back to the topic on how we are using this for integrated PV. So Firstly, what is integrated PV? It means we are integrating PV technology into other applications to capitalize on the surface area with a tremendous potential for producing solar power, which means rethinking how to produce more power from the solar energy, acknowledging the constraint of the space. We can do that on land, water, road, buildings, vehicles, and almost everything. So if we look at the world market share, according to the IRTPV latest report, it says that integrated PV systems are not only rising in demand, but also in the market share as well. So from around 2% in 2022 in the global mix to around 15% in the next decade. Though the rooftop systems look stable at 30%, but agro PV, BIPV, and floating PV are rising. And therefore, we will be talking about that in the next part of the presentation. So floating PV is using photovoltaic panels for production on lakes, on offshore or inshore capacities. So as we can see, according to the report, that in the past decade, the installed capacity of photovoltaic floating PV has increased from 1 megawatt to 5.6 gigawatt in 1 decade, which is huge. And if we look at the cumulative floating PV capacity by region, Asia holds around 85% of the installed capacity, followed by the Middle East. And India and China are accelerating their deployment at a very fast pace, even in the past 5 years. So there is a lot of potential, not only in this area of integrating photovoltaics in water, but also in the region where it is being deployed, which is the Asia Pacific region. So the key considerations for the floating PV applications would be they are site specific, which means you have to check the humidity, the salinity of the water, or the corrosive environment, which can degrade the photovoltaic modules. You need to check the wind speed, the wind load. You need to understand the waves, what is the maximum height, including the fetch, if they are going to wash over your modules and the modules are going to be disintegrated, variation in the water level or water current, anchoring and mooring design against extreme load and fatigue life, which means the anchors should not break down, and your photovoltaic panels must not be swayed away in the water due to the water current. So health and safety and working over water. Then technologies to design life, track record, warranty, supporting research base for technologies. So you need to keep all these considerations in mind so that you can design a safe system which can last longer in both offshore areas and onshore areas. So at Total Energies, we have various sites across the globe. So where we not only test different sorts of technologies of PV modules, bifacial, monofacial, the impact of cooling systems, and also the biodiversity study, how the impact of floating PV systems affect the marine life, both on top of the modules, which can result in biosoiling, and also under the modules in the ecosystem of the water. We also have experiments for the wave-induced mismatch for the technology evaluation. And we also benchmark a lot of modules for testing. For instance, which modules are better for the case of floating PV, which modules corrode less, etc., so that we can install reliable systems. And as far as the challenges of the area are concerned, these are not only our challenges, but these are the challenges that the community faces across the globe. So it would be about the components. Because it's a very fast growing area, we need to be sure whether the components that we are using are compatible with different technologies, not only module technologies, but also floaters, mounting structures, because there are no standards for the technology yet. Then we need to understand the impact of the systems on ecosystem, both marine ecosystem on top of water and under the water. We also need to check the impact of waves. For instance, wave-induced mismatch, cooling effect, and areolic interactions. And we also need to look at exploring the future potential of floating PV, where we can go ahead. For instance, if the application should be more inshore or offshore, and if it can be coupled with wind, or we can hybridize it with hydropower, with dams, for instance, as it is being done in Brazil. Okay, next we have is agri-PV, and which is the combination of agricultural production with solar electricity production. And the advantages of this system would include dual land use, which means you can grow both crops and you can generate energy, dual use of the structures, diversification of the revenues. You can earn money from both electricity production and the crops, and decarbonization of the agriculture. This agri-PV system can also help to solve the problem and reduce the issues from the violent climate change. As I mentioned that in my home state of Punjab, there were damages due to hail. And if you use this, because of the dynamic movement of the PV panels, you can prevent this thing. Further, this can also help in reducing the problem of water scarcity, because these photovoltaic modules not only provide shade to certain crops, but they also prevent water loss using different techniques. So for each of these things, the solution is to support the tailor-made landscape transformation as well. For instance, in Italy, they have created a beautiful park with different kind of photovoltaic modules, and it is for aesthetic purposes. So at Total Energies too, we are supporting our business units to develop these technologies, because France has laws for the dual use of land. And the idea is to deploy around 500 megawatts of agrivoltaic installations by 2025 in France alone. So we have several sites where we are working on testing different sorts of materials, not materials, but crops and vegetables. For instance, wheat, barley, alfalfa, lavender, and other aromatic herbs in Chane and Valparaiso, whereas we're doing some studies on maize shading. In fact, even on the research institute where I'm housed right now, we are growing some lettuce and strawberries on the rooftop, and every summer we get to eat a lot of homegrown strawberries, apart from doing experiments with them. So I think that's another advantage of doing experimentation or research in the area, that you get to eat fresh strawberries at work. Then the challenges that we face are, definitely we need to evaluate and propose agri-PV technologies based on the areas where it is going to be deployed. Also, we need to make sure that they are compatible with the crops that you're growing them with. Also, since this area is very new, you need to understand what is the impact of PV and PV crop yield with agronomic PV modules, and how does it impact the microclimate. Further, you need to check if it causes wind reduction for the crops, drought, thermal stress, and if agri-PV can be used for climate change adaptation. For example, if it can be used for the greening of the drought-prone areas in that case. Further, there are a lot of things in the development of areas where you can use artificial intelligence or remote sensing for developing site prospection tools and to check the yield of modules as well as crops from top. And also, we need to look at the long-term use of not only the PV modules, but also the life cycle analysis of the entire landscape. For instance, if in PV modules, there are materials which are going to harm the quality of life of the soil, or certain things might go into the soil, or how you're going to take it off, because we know there are a lot of things that happens with plants, and it is a lot of gases in terms of carbon dioxide, oxygen, and even certain gases are advantageous with, for example, the nitrogen, because it results in nitrogen fixation, aerialing. And so we have to take into account that what are the different things that are important for the agricultural dynamics or the crop yield, and at the same time, what are the best case scenarios for the PV production. And we need to find the best case scenario for developing this technology forward. Next is building integrated PV. So as we can see from this graph, that PV market is expected to grow by 38.7% from 2030 in 2030 from 2022, which means it will grow around it will grow to 16 million thousand in 2030 from around 1 million thousand in 2022. And if you can see, China in yellow and India in gray are the biggest markets in the Southeast Asia. There can be several design considerations for building integrated photovoltaics. So different panels can be integrated into the sides of the buildings, replacing traditional glass windows with semi-transparent thin films or crystalline solar panels, or they can be put on rooftop, replacing the materials. You can also have ultra-thin solar cells to create semi-transparent surfaces, which can allow daylight to penetrate, simultaneously generating electricity. So as you can see in the image, there can be solar shades, PV canopy, colored module facades, PV skylight, and solar balconies. So there are so many applications or so many ways in which you can deploy photovoltaic modules inside the buildings. But you have to keep into mind different environmental factors as well as the structural factors. So for instance, climate and weather conditions, shading, latitude. For instance, you should not be putting like really thin semi-transparent surfaces in areas where you have very, very high wind speed, which means the glass will like break very quickly. Or if you know that there are going to be hailstorm, you're going to use glass modules which are thicker in nature. So these are design consideration, keeping into mind energy requirements of the building as well as aesthetic and strength. So yes, so keeping in line with the time, I will stop here, but there are so many applications and areas which include vehicle integrated PV, urban photovoltaics that are currently in action, and also road transport photovoltaics. So I hope all of you will be sending a lot of submissions related to those areas as well at Solar World Congress. And I hope to see you all there. If you have any questions, you're most welcome to answer them. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn or email for questions, collaborations, or discussions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kara. That was an excellent overview of the major applications that we are seeing being undertaken today in the solar PV area. So thanks, that was a great overview. So now our next speaker, I'm pleased to introduce Professor Pradeep. Okay, thank you. Okay, Professor Pradeep Dutta is our next speaker. He's currently the J.R.D. Tata Chair Professor at the Department for Mechanical Engineering at the Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru. Professor Dutta's research group focuses on the development of advanced energy technologies related to thermal energy storage, solar thermal cooling of electronics, spacecraft thermal management, and thermal technologies related to phase change and absorption. So Professor Dutta, I turn the floor over to you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Renee. Is my screen visible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Renee, for the kind introduction, and thank you, Arabella, for giving me this opportunity to present on the theme solar thermal power as part of the Solar World Congress to be held later this year. And what I'm going to present now is basically some trends and prospects of solar thermal power. At the outset, let me clarify that solar thermal power refers to production of electricity from solar thermal, and the other applications of solar thermal, which have to do with process heating or solar cooling or heating of buildings, they will be taken care of by the respective themes. So we are dealing with solar thermal power here, which is also called the concentrating solar power, or CSP. Now we've just heard from Gurleen about the progress of deployment of solar PV and wind energy. They've been growing in leaps and bounds. But what is the story of CSP, the other solar power? Well, it's a little bit different trajectory it has taken. And what we have seen is here. So in the 80s and the 90s, there were quite a bit of installation of solar thermal power, that is CSP, mostly in the United States and then in Spain after that. So after some period of inactivity between 1991 and 2005, I think the energy crisis was gone by then. The interest in CSP again grew worldwide, primarily because of the cost reduction and some favorable policies. However, since 2012, there has been a steep decline in PV prices, and here's the view graph which shows. This shows the LCO in rupees per kilowatt hour. The reduction in prices, it was projected that by about 2018, both CSP and PV would attain the grid parity. But it so happened that around 2012, because of large-scale deployment as well as manufacturing, mainly from China, the prices dropped steeply, the polysilicon-based solar cells, and the grid parity was achieved 2012. And ever since, the prices have gone down so much that the CSP took a backseat. Because it could not come down in terms of prices by that kind of gradient. So the deployment of CSP technologies is therefore not as widespread as the PV. Now, what is the worldwide trend in CSP? We would like to see what is the trend and what are the thrusts in various parts of the world. As of now, of course, Spain has been the largest producer of CSP electricity, followed by US. However, lately, there are other countries, especially China and South Africa, UAE, and other Middle Eastern countries, they have laid out ambitious plan in CSP installation. Now, why has there been a renewed interest? It's mainly because of the affordable storage technologies, which are very natural. Storage technology is very natural to CSP, unlike in the PV, where you need large-scale batteries. So there, in terms of storage technology, it is much more affordable in the case of CSP, as with the given present technologies. So with full storage or many hours of storage, potentially CSP could be cost competitive, and also it adds to the grid stability in the future. So people have not given up on CSP, and that's why there's quite a bit of R&D that has been going on worldwide, especially in the countries I've just mentioned. Now, what is the LCOE trend? If we see that it was nearly flat during the period. So this is the view graph which shows the, I'm sorry if this may be obstructing. Okay. Is my slide fully visible, or is the panel?
No, we can see the full slide. That's fine.
Full slide. Okay. Okay. It appears to me. Sorry about that. Yeah. So the evolution of LCOE for CSP projects in 2014 has been flat, 2012, and after that there has been a downward trend because of the little bit of scale up, and also the manufacturing costs have gone down in the case of CSP. But the growth of the CSP installations have actually declined due to drop in the PV price. And the new installations of CSP, because the focus is now mainly on high pressure, high temperature applications, the solar tower CSP configuration, and with the molten salt as a storage, as well as the receiver fluid, that has gained momentum, and it is found to be the most promising. Then one needs to look at what is the viability condition for CSP. Unlike PV, which can be installed almost anywhere and everywhere because it uses both direct as well as the diffuse sunlight, CSP needs direct normal insolation, and that too at a high intensity of DNI. It turns out that around minimum of 2000 kilowatt hour per meter square per year required to justify the installation of the CSP. And there is also a question of water requirement. It so happens that such kind of DNI is usually available in arid or semi-arid conditions or regions where water scarcity is there. So therefore, to match these requirements with the kind of conflicting requirement is quite difficult sometimes. However, there's new technologies that is being developed in terms of for CSP, which is still under development in many parts, US, Europe, as well as in India, which is the closed loop supercritical CO2 Brayton cycle, which is amenable to dry cooling. It basically replaces steam as the working fluid, and not only it can operate at high temperature, yielding high efficiency, but it's also compact. So in future, there's the potential of cost reduction is quite high. So that's the kind of trend one is looking at. Now, in terms of market, so there is a region-wide distribution. So matching these kind of conditions, and also countries putting priority in solar thermal power, there is a region-wide distribution of potential CSP market, and I'm going to present a little bit on that, and then I will close it with what is the Indian scenario. Now this conference is coming back to India after nearly 4 or 5 decades. It's one can look at what is the Indian scenario as far as solar thermal power is concerned. All these view graphs which I've been presenting, which I'm going to present in the next few slides, as well as these data, it's part of a recent handbook that has been published, which I happen to be a co-author in one of the chapters, and from that chapter I'm reproducing some of these data. Let's look at Spain, which is a dominant CSP market in Europe. There have been several installations in the past with fairly high solar capacity, and many of them have been with almost 1/3 of them with storage of 4 to 6 hours or maybe more hours of storage. And one of the reasons is that there's been favorable feed-in tariff policy, which led to the growth of CSP. However, there's a reduction in that tariff, feed-in tariff, and that reduction has negatively impacted Spain's CSP market. So therefore, there are no new projects as such, no new major projects. And if you look at the United States, of course, there have been ups and downs as far as CSP is concerned. Now, where we have real potential is in the western and southwest region, basically, of US, which includes California, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Texas. In 2010, the US DOE set the sunshot target, which is basically about 0.6 cents per kilowatt hour of LCOE without subsidies target by 2020. While PV has achieved this, CSP has not been able to achieve in time. But there have been some new installations of CSP, especially the installation at Ivanpah, in which this 377 megawatt, it is a central tower facility with molten salt, but it's a direct steam, I think, generation without any storage, but there is hybridization as backup. And 2015, Crescent Dune Solar Energy Project has been installed with nearly about 10 hours of molten salt storage. Now, what does the future look like? DOE's Gen 3 roadmap for CSP target 2030 target. There have been aggressive targets for high temperature, high efficiency CSP to make it more cost competitive, and it has been led by more investment in the supercritical CO2 Brayton cycle with dry cooling, which has been a major thrust. Now, there have been other potential markets. I will not go into the details of those, but just to show you that work is going on in South Africa, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and I'll just briefly mention UAE, China, Australia, and some other countries where we have high DNI potential, and there have been some new policies which is favoring the growth of CSP. Now, what is the scenario in India? I will quickly go over that. If you look at the DNI map, it is not the solar intensity or DNI is not as high as in some countries we just saw. But the western part of India, especially Gujarat, Rajasthan, and some parts of Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Haryana, and Ladakh, which is a high elevation place, and also ambient being cold, some of these states have favorable conditions for CSP. And in 2010, when the solar mission, the National Solar Mission was launched, both PV and CSP were having almost equal prospects. And that's why the target, half the target of power to be produced or the deployment was with CSP and half with PV. But of course, as we know that after 2012, the PV prices drastically came down, and then CSP took a back seat. So it turns out that in the first phase, when it was launched, there were 7 CSP proposals with a total capacity of 470 megawatts were launched, and some of these have been successfully installed, and they have been working in Rajasthan or in Andhra Pradesh. But after these projects, again, it has taken a back seat and no new additions have resulted. And of course, the major reason being the fall in the PV prices. However, all is not lost. If you look at the energy use pattern in India, if you look at, see, heating turns out to be a huge segment where, as far as energy use is concerned, and electricity accounts for 16%. The growth of solar thermal in India primarily lies in other heating processes, and as a result, what happens is technologies, the same receiver technologies or the mirror technologies and deployment, the growth is quite significant as far as process heating and other applications are concerned. So that somehow has kept the solar thermal prospects alive. And the other issue here is that even for electricity, it is not only the grid-fed electricity that is of priority, because the distributed mode is also important as far as India is concerned. And if you look at these various sources of energy which feed into the grid, and then into all these end uses, the solar thermal large scale or solar PV, of course, can feed directly into the grid. But as far as distributed is concerned, and remember that distributed necessarily needs storage, because it has to be reliable and maybe round the clock or with a large with a number of hours of storage, which feeds into. So electricity is one of the options of distributed, and there are other uses of distributed as well. So quite a bit of R&D has been going on in India as far as distributed. By distributed, we means hundreds of kilowatts to a few megawatts of capacity of electricity to be produced. So that's the scenario, and so this is where major R&D thrust is needed. As a result, right now, the present thrust of CSP in India, and with the government policies as well, the high temperature, high pressure system with thermal storage is being looked at. Distributed mode development of SCO2 based CSP plant is one of the priorities, and associated, of course, heat transfer fluids, storage materials, receiver systems, high temperature receivers. So all these are of priority, and we are hoping that we can collect a large number of abstracts and submissions in many of these areas, other areas of CSP as well, worldwide, and a large number from India would be expected now the conference. Yeah. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duda. That was a very interesting overview of the status of CSP technologies, and I think it's very important for those who are attending this webinar that are working in this field to consider presenting their recent work in this area at the Congress because of its importance. I think both this talk as well as the previous talk from Dr. Kaur shows the ongoing importance of R&D in these technologies in order to continue to bring the cost down and make them competitive. So thank you. That was very interesting. So our third panelist today is Dr. Manojit Sengupta of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. He's the theme chair for Solar Resource Assessment and Energy Meteorology. And as you saw in Dr. Duda's presentation, that's a very important topic in and of itself for the Congress. Dr. Sengupta is currently the chief scientist in the Predictive Analytics and Sensing section at NREL, and he leads research areas in solar resource assessment, solar forecasting, and PV variability. He's got 25 years of experience in atmospheric modeling, assimilation, and observational analysis, and he is an expert in remote sensing, forecasting, and analysis of clouds and solar radiation. He's also led research as part of DOE's climate change program to study the impact of clouds on surface radiation. And just a personal note, Dr. Sengupta is a colleague of mine. I had the privilege of working with him closely at NREL for the last few years I was there. and I know he's going to give us a very important talk. So manage it. Yeah, I turn the podium over to you. Thank you for participating today.
Thanks, Dave. I guess let me bring up my presentation, but okay, share my screen. I hope you can see my screen.
It's all fine. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Dave, for the nice introduction. Yes, Dave I've had the opportunity to learn a lot from Dave over the years, and Dave being a senior colleague who actually hired me into NREL, so hopefully I won't disappoint him in my presentation. But nevertheless, let's talk about Team 11 and what's going on in solar resource. Essentially, as all of you know, it's the source is the fuel for solar. So that's what we're going to talk about. Most important to know is this fuel is essentially free. It's just available. We need to harness it better. And to harness it better, we need to know more about how the behavior of solar over space and time and what's going to happen in the future. Because end of the day, solar technologies depend on essentially harnessing solar, and they depend on the availability of solar for many years as technologies start lasting for 25, and now PV, the goal is to last for 50 years. Anyway, so why do we need solar resource information? If you really look at it, it's required for all phases of a solar project. We start with the pre-feasibility studies, where there's the use of existing model data, existing ground data, and what we try to understand, we use as annual values to essentially understand whether a location is even worth looking into. Then we move to the feasibility space, where a little bit more higher resolution data sets are required, because you're looking at annual variability. Probably hourly data is required to understand more of the variability. And then there is, of course, there's this typical meteorological year, and we're going to go into that a little bit more. Ultimately, there's the due diligence and acceptance part of the project. Sometimes you require 1 minute data sets. And then once your plant starts operating, of course, there is this issue of maintenance and understanding the performance of your plants, and then what you're going to deliver tomorrow. So you need forecast information. So essentially, this area contributes to all phases of a project. So various ways of getting to the information we need for the projects. Of course, solar resource measurement has been there for a long time. Technology has evolved. The radiometer technologies have evolved over time. If you really look at at NREL, we provide data. We started measuring solar radiation since 1981. There are other places where you can get long time series of data. Of course, solar resource measurement is the most accurate source of data locally, only if there are quite a few ifs here. Your instruments are of high quality. That's important because you do not want instruments to drift or have significant biases, and your instruments should be spectrally flat, so that they can measure the actual amount of solar radiation available without varying too much spectrally. Then calibration of instruments, that's extremely important. So you could have a high quality instrument, but if you do not calibrate it on a regular basis, things might drift a little bit, and the data might not be as accurate. Same thing with maintenance. We could have the best instruments, but there's soiling issues. There are other trackers might get misaligned. So there needs to be regular maintenance checks to ensure that the data is good quality data is being collected. And that comes to the issue of quality control. Quality control is real time. It's and that's the difference between quality assessment. Quality assessment is done after the fact when we look at the data and we assess the quality of the data. But quality control is real time, so we need to ensure that data is what we are collecting is of good quality. That comes from maintenance and regular real-time checks. Of course, because there's a lot of research still going on in all of these areas. Essentially, as we have more and more of these solar deployments, and the goal is to be able to produce data of even higher quality with instruments which might cost a little less. Ultimately, though, these measurements are expensive to set up and maintain. Therefore, it's not easy to have wide coverage for long periods of time. That's the drawback of solar measurements. So essentially, we do have to justify the cost when setting up solar resource measurement stations. So what has happened is that they're normally for solar energy, they're primarily deployed for shorter periods of time, initially for assessment, and then the instruments are then are always available when a plant is set up. Initially, though, they're primarily used for site adaptation and validation. So there's a lot of resources and there's a lot of work going on in this area, and there are a lot of resources on how to take accurate measurements. Of course, it all starts with the World Radiometric Reference, because every instrument has to be traceable to the WRR for a measurement to be valid. I won't go into the details, but that's maintained in Davos by PMOD, and every country, essentially, there is a national meteorological institute, or in the US, it's NREL who maintains this reference for the country. The reference is essentially a watts per meter square reference, so that's what we maintain for the US. Similarly, there is an organization in India which maintains this reference for India. Then we look at standards, because essentially for reducing the cost of solar deployments and making it all uniform, we have all these standards. If you check on ISO, there's STM and IC standards for calibration and measurement. Then we talk about we have the International Energy Agency test, PVPS test 16. Some of you might be aware of it. There is this best practices handbook, which is an excellent resource for a lot of information on solar resource. And if you look at chapter 2 and 8, they provide information on how to take good measurements and how to estimate the uncertainty in these measurements. So this is freely available for anybody. So if you want to know more about the measurements, you can get it here. There's of course high quality data. One example is the NREL website. You can get real-time data, but the data goes back to 1981. If you wanted to look at some good quality data and best practices, this is a good resource. And then, of course, the IPVS PVS Task 16 reports, because there's active research conducted by nearly 20 countries, experts, over 100 experts. So that's a good source for information on measurements. Moving on to soil resource modeling, of course, most of you are aware of satellite-based modeling. Satellite-based modeling is very popular. The data from satellite-based soil resource models are widely used. We just saw some maps by Professor Datta on the DNI maps. All of those were derived from satellite models. The main advantage, of course, of satellites is global coverage. There's a long time series, high resolution and accuracy, and it represents the size of PV plants. If you look at the footprint of these coverage of these and resolution of these satellites, it's like nowadays 2 kilometers, kind of the size of a reasonable PV plant. Of course, satellite-based soil resource model requires supplementary information. The better it is, the better the model results are, because there's uncertainty there. But we need information about aerosols, albedo, especially as bifacial becomes more important. Surface albedo becomes more important. We need the information, especially on snow, because snow is highly reflective. This requirement needs for understanding water vapor. Then the circumsolar radiation, that's important too. Again, technology improvements has led to satellites with more channels, higher temporal and spatial resolution. The GHOST satellites, which covered the Americas, it's 2 kilometers, 5 minutes, similar type of resolution in Himawari, which covers Japan, Australia, China. Then the Meteosat 3rd generation has been launched, covers Europe and Africa, and that too has similar resolution. And again, these soil resource models, which are satellite-based, they have been integrated into various downstream models for actually calculating energy yields. Example, the system advisor model from NREL, the PVSys, most of the data from various sources, be it like the NREL datasets, which are available from the National Solar Radiation Database, or other commercial datasets, they're mostly easily integrated into these models. Some resources on modeling. Again, I refer back to the best practice handbook. If you have a look at chapter 4, there is a wealth of information there. One example of free public data sets which have global coverage, and this is, we produce this in NREL. If you look at the National Solar Radiation Database website, you can get access to this data free of cost. Of course, there are additional sources of data beyond what we produce at NREL. Chapter 6 of this handbook, again, has lots of links to various data sets, which are available both commercially or just public data sets. Then moving on we just talked about solar radiation, but of course for most of our energy modeling work, we require additional information, atmospheric information. So of course, like I mentioned, we need albedo, we know the aerosol, optical depths, water vapor, temperature, pressure, rate transfer models require that. There are various sources of this information. We do try to model some of that. Some of it is, there's measurements available for some, but again, that's not global coverage. So ultimately, most of the information ends up coming from models. Again, when we're doing PV modeling, we require additional parameters, temperature, wind speed, albedo. When we look at studying reliability, we need information about temperature, humidity, and ultraviolet radiation. Again, if chapter 5 of the best practice handbook provides more information about these additional atmospheric parameters. As you can see, I keep referring back to this handbook because it's built by over 40 experts from over 15 countries. There's a wealth of information there, freely available. The next edition, of course, comes out as this field rapidly advances. The next edition will be available in the December-January timeframe, so keep look out for that. Finally, we're looking at downstream solar data and models. In the space, we have various models required for PV modeling. So of course we have the data. I've talked about the data from various sources, but we need to take the data and then we have to decompose it. Say we have only the global data information available, the models to parse it into the diffuse and the direct. There are various models for that. There's active research in that area. There are these transposition models because most PV is not deployed in the horizontal. It has had some tilt, so there are models to convert from horizontal to tilt. Then there's the TMY, the spectral models, clear sky models, all sky models. So there's a lot of research going on, and there's free sources of code. One example is the PVlib toolbox. Finally, of course, like I mentioned, the solar forecasts, and then there's various timescales of interest for solar forecasts. There's sky imagery for the sub-hourly. Satellite modes can be used to forecast 1 to 3 hours. There's weather models. And then as we go into longer timescales, the statistical estimates and regional climate models. In the interest of time, I'll quickly go through this. There's, of course, sky images. There's active research in this area where people look at take images of the sky, and then you map the clouds and try to do a par forecast as the cloud moves across the sky. Extremely complicated, so active area of research. Similarly, with the sky images from this camera, which is looking up, there's, of course, the satellites looking down, and similar type of technologies are being developed to essentially move the clouds, forecast where the clouds are moving from a satellite viewpoint. Then there's weather modeling for day ahead, and these are weather prediction models. These are physical models which are used to forecast day ahead solar generation. Significant effort in the IEA and all over the world. Probabilistic forecasts have become very important. Because they not only give you a forecast, but they also give you some uncertainty associated with the forecast, which makes the information more useful. If you look at Chapter 8 on the in solar forecasting handbook, you probably get a lot of details about this. And then just as a reference, there's a model which is freely available, which is called the WRF Solar Ensemble Prediction System, where you can essentially, if you're so inclined, you could run your own probabilistic sort of forecast model. Finally, just requesting all of you to participate here at the Solar World Congress in New Delhi. We are looking forward to your participation and your abstracts on solar measurements for solar energy applications, solar resource modeling, solar forecasting at various time scales. And of course, coming up is the impact of climate on solar generation. What do we expect to see in the future as we say 30 years from now, 40 years from now? Is it going to be the same? What changes do we see on the horizon? That's important for as our plants start lasting 50 years. And then, of course, there are a lot of people who are doing new type of development of new technologies for measurement and new models. So look forward to your presentation, your abstracts going forward. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. And I look forward to seeing all of you in New Delhi. Dave, Arabella.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Manajit. I'm just taking the screen back to myself. So Manajit, thank you very much for that presentation, very insightful, and thank you for the many examples you gave on how to actually apply solar resource research. We are now coming to our final presentation for today, but before we get into that, just a quick word from Dave. He had to leave early for another appointment, but he says, thanks a lot to all of you speakers and thanks the audience for attending. So I will be taking over from here on. And I'm now happy to introduce the final speaker for today, which is my colleague Melina Hanhardt. She works here at the ISES team as Communications, Countries and Outreach Officer. Melina joined us back in 2021 and she's become a permanent member of our team in 2022. So the Solar World Congress is actually Melina's first Solar World Congress with ISES, which we are very proud of. She holds an international master's degree in social science from the University of Freiburg, University of Cape Town, and Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. And so Melina is going to introduce us to the more detailed questions around the conference. So how to submit a paper, how to submit side event applications, and much more. So Melina, it's my pleasure to hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Arabella. I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Can you all see my presentation now?
Looking good, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, as Arabella already said, and now we're getting to the practical part of the Solar World Congress, how you can participate. And well, we warmly invite you to join us in New Delhi and submit your abstract to present your research. But you can also submit a proposal for a side event, which I will get back to later. First of all, I would like to present to you our 13 Congress themes. They include topics that fit to the categories of electrical components, systems, and applications, represented by Dr. Kaur, with like PV technologies, also thermal component systems and applications, presented by Professor Dutta, but also cross-cutting subjects, under which Mr. Sengupta's presentation would fall. And these 13 themes also have sub-themes, which you can find on the SWC website. So feel free to take a look at them for more details. And authors are invited to submit their abstract according to one of these 13 Congress themes. For abstract submission, authors can select their preference to present a paper in an oral or poster session, but the final decision on the presentation format will be made by the scientific committee. We have, per author, a maximum of 2 abstracts can be submitted and presented at the conference. All abstracts and full papers must be submitted in English, and abstracts should not exceed 3 A4 pages in total, but should please be longer than a few lines only, so we ask for an extended abstract. Submission deadline is the 15th of May, and the QR code you find on the slide leads to the template which we ask you to use for your abstract, and yeah, the link, but everything can also be found on the SWC website. If your abstract is ready for submission, you can upload your abstract in our abstract submission portal. This QR code leads to the portal. You simply sign up by inserting your email ID and a password, and then you can easily submit your abstract in the system as PDF and a Word file. And yeah, what happens after you submit your abstract? So after the abstract submission deadline on 15th of May, the review process starts, and abstracts will be reviewed by at least 2 designated scientific committee reviewers, and it will be a blind review, so they will not know your name. And review criteria for abstracts are the suitability for the theme, the quality of research goals, novelty and significance of the work, and of course also standard of writing and appropriate style. Then in June, authors will receive a notification via email regarding their acceptance of the abstract. Then they will be asked to register, and in general Congress registration will open in June as well. Closer to the Congress, we will confirm the author's presentation format in the Congress program. And then full papers are to be submitted until the 15th of October. And then authors are invited to present their work at the Congress in person sometime between the 30th of October and the 4th of November in New Delhi. And then after the Congress, the full paper review process starts. And authors will be notified if changes need to be done on their full paper before the publication. And then accepted papers will be published in early 2024 with an individual DOI in the conference proceedings. That will be publicly accessible and searchable online on our database. And in addition, a selected number of the highest quality papers from each topic of the SWC will be invited to be submitted, peer-reviewed, and published by our ISES scientific journal, the Solar Energy Advances. Yeah, that was all you needed to know about submitting an abstract, but there is also the option for you to submit a proposal for a side event. Side events are an effective means to bringing the work your organization conducts to a dynamic international audience, as we will hopefully have at the Solar World Congress. Side events are 90-minute moderated sessions with between 3 to 5 speakers that should provide diverse points of views and stimulates audience discussion on a specific topic that is either within one of the Congress themes that I presented across several themes, or on a renewable energy topic that is not directly covered by the Congress theme. So submissions are open to diverse themes. Also for this, the deadline for submission is the 15th of May. And if you follow the QR code or the link, you will find a form to fill out with your side event proposal, a short description, what you would like to present. And you also there can find a guideline on side events, so what we would expect. And all side event proposals will be then collected and brought to the International Organizing Committee. And then it will be discussed which can take place. But next to the technical sessions and oral and poster presentations, side events and more, we will also offer exciting social programs for our Congress participants. There you will have many opportunities to network and to get to know your fellow researchers and solar energy promoters from around the world. For example, at our conference dinner, but we will also have young ISES events dedicated to our student participants and emerging professionals, which we also encourage to participate at the conference. And we will also offer technical tours to visit exciting solar energy sites around New Delhi. And yeah, with that, I would like to invite you again to submit your abstract or side event proposal to spread the word with your colleagues and friends so that we can all get together in New Delhi later this year. Giving over to you again, Arabella.
Yes, thank you very much, Melina. Let me just switch back screens, and thank you very much for the presentation. We are now heading into the Q&A part of our webinar. So any questions you might have either to our 3 presenting theme chairs or to Melina about the Congress specifically, please submit the questions in the chat box. And the chat box, you can find it on the GoToWebinar panel. We received a few questions already, so I would like to start off with a question to you, Professor Dutta. And you spoke on the direct normal irradiation, the DNI, and we have one attendee and they are wondering, when we're looking towards Europe, do you not feel that the DNI limits applications in some regions of Europe, for example, Norway or Sweden? Professor Dutta, do you have an answer?
Yes. Yeah, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, and you can also turn on your camera if you like.
Yes, I turned it on, I think, yes. Yeah, I think it's a very valid question, a good question. So, and that's the reason, if you look at Europe, only the Southern Europe, there has been some CSP installation, especially Spain and some in Italy. But the most other parts of Europe, which is a bit northern, because of the low DNI and fewer, solar hours during the winter time, we don't see any deployment of CSP. So I hope it answers the question, or if I understood it correctly.
Yes, thank you very much. And Professor Dutta, while we have you here, and also a question in combo to Gerline, what's the efficiency factor between CSP and PV in generation of electricity? So can you get us an idea on how those two relate?
Should I go first because I'm already there?
Yes,
I'll
please
make an
go ahead.
attempt. Okay, so I'll make an attempt to answer this. Yes, as far as CSP is concerned, the efficiency is a function of a number of factors. The first one is the temperature, the receiver temperature or the working fluid temperature. The higher the temperature, the more will be the thermal efficiency. So there is, in the overall efficiency of a CSP, we have first the optical efficiency, and then we have the thermal efficiency, basically the efficiency of the power plant that is running. The optical efficiency part depends on the mirror configurations and the quality of the mirrors, the accuracy, and so on. So there have been, and other factors are also there depending on the location, the cosine losses and other things. So one can achieve maybe about say 60% or so. Then the thermal efficiency part depends on the temperature at which the power plant is running, the working fluid turbine inlet temperature. And in that, the high temperature, new high temperature applications, a lot of it is under development, especially on the supercritical CO2 or high pressure, high temperature, ultra supercritical steam, for instance. They can achieve higher temperature. So a combination of this efficiency, one can target something, say, on the order of 20 or 25% overall efficiency. It's possible, but there are many things under development, especially the high temperature, high pressure applications. On the PV side, I mean, of course, it depends on the material and the kind of PV technologies. Of course, I would request my colleague Kudlin to take that.
Okay. Thank you for the question. In case of PV module efficiency, it would depend upon the kind of material that you're using, as Professor Datta rightly pointed out. If you're using silicon, you're using polysilicon, you're using 3,5 materials or perovskite, that plays a role. Also, it depends whether it is a single junction or a multi-junction material, that plays a role. Then you have to see where you are deploying the panel. For example, right now, if the efficiency or out of the lab efficiency of a module is, let's say, 20% or 23%, maybe in a year's time, it is going to degrade by 0.2% to 0.5% due to light-induced degradation and effects like that. And in desert, for example, soiling cases are, or losses due to soiling are very high because of the sand that can permeate through it. So normally when we look at the efficiency, we don't look at the efficiency of the module, but we also look at the efficiency in terms of their entire life cycle. So if I have to just give you some numbers, for example, according to the recent NREL charts, the highest efficiency of a solar cell for a tandem crystalline silicon perovskite solar cell is around 33.2% for this year. Whereas for a module, the highest efficiency is around 24 to 25%. But then if there are several technologies of crystalline silicon solar cells, for example, PERC, Pearl, TOPCon, and then several kinds, which is monofacial module where you collect light from one side, or bifacial modules where you collect light from both the sides. So then these things play a role with like in terms of the efficiency too. For example, bifacial modules where you're collecting light from both the sides are more efficient than monofacial modules. So you have to look into that. Apart from these basic things, I would also like to add module efficiency also depends on the kind of materials you use in terms of what mass paste do you use for metallization, what kind of tempered glass you're using, what sort of encapsulant polymer you're using to make a module, and things like that. So I think there are a wide variety of factors, and when we talk about efficiency, we measure this efficiency at standard temperature conditions. So these are the ideal conditions, and these standard temperature conditions, which are 25 degrees Celsius, 1000 watt per meter square, etc., irradiation, are quite different from the real world condition. And I think we should always remember that. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thank you, Golene, and thank you, Professor Dutta. I think we had very extensive answers to that question, so I hope our attendee got all the information they needed. Thanks a lot for that. We have a few, the attendee says, thanks a lot, good job. So very well done. We have a few questions that came in on the specifics of the Congress, and I'd like to hand over some of those questions to my colleague, Melina. So the first question that comes up, and which is always an important one, is what are the tentative registration fees for the conference? What do we know on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Unfortunately, right now we cannot say what the exact fees will be, but we are working on fixing the themes in the upcoming weeks. And what we can already say is that we plan to have various discounts, for example, for early bird registrations, but also for ISES members, and for authors, we will also offer a discount. So yeah, stay tuned on the next newsletters and on our website. We will communicate the registration fees as soon as we have fixed them.
Perfect, thank you, Melina. And next question in regards to the conference, do we think there's going to be an opportunity to display solar devices, for example, a solar cooker?
At the moment, we don't have something like that planned, but feel free to write us an email to our swc@ises.org inbox, and we can bring it to the International Organizing Committee and see if it's possible. Also depends on the venue, but yeah, we will definitely consider this.
Perfect, thank you. I received a question, and I'm going to cover it real quick. If we could maybe say more about the Congress program, and yes, we can. So a usual Solar World Congress program always includes keynotes, and those are like very high-level presentations by top experts in their field. And we usually invite a wide variety of international and local experts to give keynote presentations. So those are really top-notch 30-minute technical presentations on their respective theme. We always have plenary sessions. Those usually are group sessions where you will have, let's say, between 3 to 5 speakers, and they will all be speaking on the same topic. Again, very high-level speakers, often from other international organizations, from big companies, from important national institutions, especially in India, where we have a strong presence of many solar national institutes, from local universities, research institutes. So plenary sessions always are leading discussion forums on really pressing and important solar questions. Then, of course, on the whole abstract and paper side, which Melina covered, we will have the oral and the poster presentation by the authors who submitted their work. So that's a key point to the conference. And then, as Melina mentioned, also social program, technical tours to interesting solar facilities nearby. We always put an emphasis on events for young conference attendees, so an opportunity for them to get together, to get to know the other young attendees, but also it's very important for us to connect the young attendees with the senior experts at the conference. So we always try to really have a forum where both of these groups can meet, because I think we all know that one of the biggest values in these scientific conferences is the exchange between the experts, the young experts and the senior experts. And our theme chairs on the call and all the other theme chairs, so we have 13 themes, 2 theme chairs per theme. So we have a huge group of really well of expert theme chairs, and they all are there for you to meet and to network and to really get your expertise going. So it's going to be a key part of the conference program. Another question, and I think Melina, you already spoke on that a bit. What about ISES members? I believe there are a few benefits to ISES members, right?
Yes, so ISES members will be able to have a discounted conference fee, and yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, so ISES members, you will usually receive your discount code in an email sometime before we open the registration. If any of you on the call are not ISES members yet, please visit ises.org, and then there are big buttons to kind of follow that will tell you more about how do ISES memberships work, what are the benefits such as discounted Congress fees. So it's quite easy on our website if you are interested in that. Melina, could you repeat and remind us what is the most important deadline for authors at the moment?
The 15th of May is the deadline for abstract submissions, but also for the side event proposals. So yeah, mark it in your calendars. 2.5 weeks to go. Get your abstracts ready, and we look forward to receiving everything until the 15th of May.
Okay, super. Yeah, so I think we all got that in our calendars. 15th of May is the day to submit the abstract at the very latest. Okay, if there are no more questions on the call right now, I want to highlight for everybody, if you have a look at your GoToWebinar panel, there is one section on that panel and it's called handouts. And if you click on it, you should be able to see 2 handouts which we have placed there for you. One is a PDF document, and that's the call for participation. So that's the full text on what you can do to submit your work to the conference. And we invite you to download it and share it. And we've also added the key visual, so that's the conference banner, to this download area, so you can download it and share it with your colleagues and friends if you think the Congress might be something of interest to them. Good. And I think with that, my final announcements for today, the webinar has been recorded and we will have the recording as well as the presentations as you saw them available online in a few days. And that will be available on the ISES homepage and I believe also on the Solar World Congress homepage. For ISES members on the call, remember you already have unlimited access to all past ISES webinars and the presentations through the ISES members area. So go there and find past webinars if you wanted to catch up on them. And then finally, thanks everybody for joining us today. Please stay in touch. If you have any specific questions on the conference, please send an email to swc@ises.org. That's where my colleague Melina will patiently await all of your messages and we will get back to as many as we can as soon as possible. You can obviously find ISES on all the relevant social media channels, which is also where we share more news on the conference as we go along. So if we have a new speaker to announce, if there's a new deadline, if there is a new event coming up specifically for the conference, that's where you can always stay up to date on the daily. All right, with that, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much to our speakers for presenting, giving us insights into what we can expect at the conference. And thank you to you, the audience, for joining us. Stay tuned, and we are very much looking forward to welcoming you in New Delhi in October. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, everybody.